r/askreddit. What is the scariest thing you've ever seen while driving at night?
A six-fifth kangaroo standing in the middle of a pitch-black road at 3 a.m. in the morning, missed it by a bee's dip. Excellent. A new unit of measurement for my wife to use. Thank you.
I slammed the brakes once because I saw a deer in my peripheral vision. Upon closer inspection, it was a mounted deer head on a stick in the middle of the woods. Slammed the gas after I realized that. Excuse me, but what the fuck?
A dead, butchered horse laying in the road. Someone had completely skinned and butchered a horse, took the choice pieces of meat, and just dumped it on the highway. I almost crashed into it.
What deer?
I'm guessing it fell out of their truck on their way to dump it, or else they hit it on the road by accident and decided not to waste the meat. I've seen this happen with deer, but never a horse.
I was driving on the expressway around 2 a.m. in a semi, hit a car and it went into the median. The car basically folded into itself and was beyond smashed. I can't imagine that person survived. It was incredibly sad and terrifying to see.
Before my parents moved to where I am, I'd often visit my hometown up north, a 10-hour drive all on the same highway. Made that trip several times, and there was almost always some tragic crash at least once during the drive. I'm not super religious, but I got in the habit of saying a prayer for them and their families. Hate seeing that.
That's a long drive. It's really terrifying to see crashes like that because it really could happen to anyone.
A hitchhiker almost leaping out in front of my car on a dark forest road late at night. The woman, it really popped out of nowhere. Had to drift into the oncoming lane. Luckily, there was no one else and painted median there. Read a police report that she ended up getting hit minutes after I drove by. She was intoxicated and running from the police. Pretty effing creepy. I hope she's alright. I can't imagine what the driver that hit her was thinking.
Had a similar thing, but it was a suicide attempt. He put his shirt over his head so he couldn't see and jumped out in front of our car. We missed him by inches also. We were young, dumb and drunk. We would have been jailed for years, I'm sure.
Having someone jump in front of my car is one of my greatest fears. Anytime there's someone walking along the side of the road, I get tense and watch them like a hawk. The psychological stress something like that would bring is unimaginable for me, not to mention the potential of getting in legal trouble if the law found you at any sort of fault.
Driving to work at 4:30 a.m. and seeing a cyclist with his head split open and brains on the road.
My friend and I were walking home at about 2 a.m. one night about 15 years ago. We see this car going in the opposite direction, clearly going way past the speed limit, as he's passing us. We see him go up on the curb and hit someone walking on the opposite sidewalk, decapitating them. This was before we had cell phones and everything was closed because it was such a tiny town. We ran as fast as we could to the nearest house, about 15 to 20 minutes away, and banged on their door until they opened it so we could call the cops. I still see it in my sleep sometimes.
Did they catch the driver? A lonely abandoned shack with a bunch of arrows pointing to it, saying, "Come in!"
That's something you gotta go back to during daytime.
With 10 friends and rifles.
Frogs. Fucking. Everywhere. Like hundreds of frogs all over the road.
Ooh. This happened to me one summer. I worked at a factory out in the boonies. One road leading out there had a pond on one side and a marshy, scummy wetland on the other side. One night I was heading in, and the whole road was a carpet of peepers. I had frog guts coating the underside of my car. Stank like crazy when my shift was off. Replaced the muffler around Christmas, and there was still frog legs stuck under there.
I was following a grey Toyota Tundra in a massive blizzard through Montana on McDonald Pass. He was going pretty quick most of the way, but must have been unfamiliar with how steep the final few miles are. He got away from me as I slowed down to about 35. Not 5 minutes later, I passed his tyre marks in the fresh snow that went off the side of the mountain, pulled over and looked down to see his truck upside down and on fire about 300 yards down. Called 911. He didn't die but was burnt up pretty bad. Sad and scary, and don't go 50 in the snow just because you have a truck or 4 would.
I've heard it said before, but I'll say it again. 4-wheel drive isn't 4-wheel stop.
More weight may mean more traction, but also means more inertia.
I got off on my exit, and the whole road was covered in blood. I put on my brights and saw a bisected body of a large animal. It just made me so sad.
A closed Waffle House.
This is by far the scariest reply on this thread. A closed Waffle House signifies the end of times.
I was fetching someone from his workplace. Had to go through some fields, and some parts of the road were dark. I saw a thin, long object wiggling at an upright position at the side, if the road in front of me.
Totally freaked me out. I thought I was finally experiencing something extraordinary. As I got closer, I realized it was a tail of a cow. It must have escaped from some field and was hanging around at the side of the road.
The cow itself was black, the tail slightly lighter in color. That's why I only saw the tail moving first without seeing the whole cow first.
Oh my, yes, dear, that's just old Bessie's bottom, not a ghost worm.
Someone I knew locally came across a Jeep that had just crashed into the ditch on a highway at night, flipped on. Its top, wheels still turning kind of thing. He was the first on scene, so-called 911, and ran down into the ditch. The driver, who was badly mangled, had been tossed from the car and was dying. This guy held him and the driver died in his arms. The weirdest part of it all was that he found out the next day that it was his cousin, but he hadn't been able to recognize him.
I hope the guy who died was comforted by knowing a family member was with him.
I think just to be held by anyone. Sometimes it's all we can do for each other.
Killer clown on the side of a deserted country road during the 2016 clownpocalypse. I think I cried.
My freshman year of high school, we had to cancel a football game due to people saying clowns were going to show up.
A body in the ditch. Thought it was a deer as I approached, and then my brain was like, deer don't wear boots. I was shaking as I did a U-turn to make sure the person was alive. They were just drunk, and some people stopped as well. An emergency was called. I was so shaken up by it.
It's nice of you to go back and see if they're okay. A lot of people just drive by nowadays.
An asshole overtaking a petrol tanker around a blind corner coming my way. Scared the crap out of me.